season, and we urge you to be safe. Exercise extreme caution when you're on your way to FETs, when you're returning home. We urge you also to be aware of your surroundings, secure your valuables, do not wear expensive jewelry, do not leave your purses or wallets unattended, lock your cars, and do not carry expensive phones to these FETs. You know, just be careful. Also, if you're leaving home, chat with your neighbors, have them throw an eye, as we say, and be safe. We definitely would like you to be safe. Well, this morning we touched base with Tobago, and joining us, we spoke to this gentleman just a couple days ago. I believe it was perhaps last week, Pastor Paul Joseph, who spoke about the marriage seminar, and it is called Marriage Matters. So this morning we will be touching base with him again as we focus on certain areas such as enjoying the single life, dating, marriage, divorce, separation, domestic violence, and a whole lot more. Good morning, Pastor Joseph.
Hi, a pleasant good morning to you and all of the members of staff, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, so did this event actually happen already?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually took place on the 20th of this month, and we had a wonderful time.
So some of the topics that I just called out, those were the areas of focus. So my first question to you, enjoying the single life. How practical is this, especially at a time where people complain that the single life might be boring or time is of the essence, age is catching up? What advice do you have?
Right. The council read the entire meeting for singles. I'll tell you something, the ability of somebody to take care of themselves and to love themselves, it impacts directly their movement and their function when in a committed relationship. So the single life, some people view singleness as a curse. You know, some people see it as very awkward, especially in festive times. They feel awkward, they feel sort of left out. But it lays the foundation for a very, very important aspect of maturity as an individual. When one is single, you have the time to really focus on self-development, because after marriage and after kids, sometimes it's difficult to find time for yourself. So singleness is not a curse. It's certainly not a curse. It's a time for development.
Yes. All right. Very, very important there. Also, how important is it to wait for the right person? And how do you know when you've met the correct or the one?
Right. That's a very intelligent question. And to be very honest with you, it takes, my counsel is usually that you should not only love with your heart. One must love with your head too. You have to love with your heart and your head. Tobagonians have a saying, they say, what you see in the day, don't take a flambeau and look for it in the night. So Trinidadians may struggle, some Trinidadians may struggle to comprehend, right, that saying, but I'll explain it. Sometimes you may be dating somebody and you would see certain traits. Sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's jealousy, sometimes all sorts of traits. Sometimes these traits are some positive, some negative. And what some people do is that they believe that by getting married to this person, the marriage will fix the shortcomings. It will remedy the problems. And more than often, the exact opposite happens.
I've heard this saying once that you don't ever know somebody until you live with them. How true is that?
There is some truth to it, but going back to the former question, I'll tell you something. It's important for persons to do a historical research of the individual that they're about to join themselves to. It's very, very important. A lot of older people do it. Like my father, when my father meets any random person, he would ask questions like, who are you? Where did you come from? Who's your mother? Who's your father? And then he begins to, make this assessment of who the individual is. When someone is in a dating process, it's important. I always advise to go home. You must go home to the person's parents. One must observe how these people live. How do they deal with conflict resolution at their home, right? How do they deal with finances? What's their philosophy on finances? What's their philosophy on housework, on chores, right? What's their religious background? And when you begin to look into the past of the individual, it would really, really assist if you want to have a future with this individual.
All right, a very important question, especially for young Christian men and women. I often hear this saying, there are options. You know, a young lady was telling me recently, she has options, but the thing is, she isn't sure which way to go. She's waiting for that direction from God. She's waiting for that confirmation.
Right.
Is it that you wait for a peace? How do you know?
Right, right. There are two sides to the coin, you know. One side is as you said, right? Sometimes there'd be a peace that would come. You know, sometimes God could direct people. Yes, it has happened before to the spouse. Also, there's a very practical side to this. And some people get caught up, they get lost, and it's confusing because you have a lot of emotions at play, right? And you have all these butterflies, and sometimes emotions could mask a lot. But coming back to the point, how do you know? An assessment, a practical assessment must be done of the individual. And it must start with the history. It mustn't start with the present, it must start with the history. It must start with the parents, where did they come from? And I'm not saying that if somebody comes from, you know, and not so successful background, you should shun them. No. But the history must be considered. One of the first things that must be considered. Parents. Because when you get married to this individual, two worlds are coming together. And you may think that, oh, that's my brother-in-law, and that's my mother-in-law, and, you know, we'll be totally separate and we'll be in a bubble. No, it doesn't happen like that. You will not be in a bubble. And at some point in time, you and all of these people will have to interact, right? And sometimes their challenges become your challenges. So a practical assessment of the individual must be done. Not just based on financial status or education. You know, I looked at a movie once, and it was about some gangsters, and there was a young fella coming up the ranks, and he met a young lady that he really loved, and he asked the question to a senior member of the gang. He said, how do I know if she's the one? And he said, here, what to do? Back in those days, the cars didn't have, you know, the fancy doors that we have, and the rain was falling. He said, here, what to do? When you go to the car, open the door and have her sit, and go around on the other side. And if she stretch across and unlock for you, you should marry her. But if she sits and she doesn't consider you, leave her alone. So simple things, you understand, is important to observe people when they're not looking.
I may have feel about
the character of the individual.
Earlier you mentioned historical research, and you said that your dad would normally go and do some background checks, chat with the family, etc. And I also remember saying that you don't just marry the individual, but you marry their families. So my question to you, in today's era, historical research might be Facebook, a Facebook search.
And that's a challenge with social media. Social media has changed everything. And yes and no, because sometimes people could be so savvy and so deceitful that they could have these fake profiles. And there's so much fake out here now that my best, you know, you could go through the person's profile, nothing wrong with that, but to get the hands around the neck of the situation, I believe is important to go home by the person and be familiar with the living, the surrounding, how they communicate. Because if you go to that home and you see something that you absolutely cannot live with, if while dating this person, you observe some traits that you absolutely cannot live with, and the person is unwilling and unable to change, you'd have to give a lot of thought into whether you should proceed with this relationship. The challenge is that some people are so in love, they are so lost in this world of love, that, you know, sometimes they make foolish decisions and in hope that a child or a marriage could remedy the problem, but it rarely ever works.
Pastor Joseph, it was such a pleasure chatting with you. There are so many other areas I wish to discuss. I wanted to ask you about the challenges or the 3 top challenges facing marriage, and perhaps next week or the week after we could probably look into that.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Always a pleasure chatting with you.
Always a pleasure.